pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Hubble,
Yes, sir.
my name is Scott Cheek. We'll go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm the Vice President of the Board. We'll go over here.
My name is Patricia Carter Lewis.
Bobby Jones. Nothing up top. Dylan Ty, Secretary of the Board. Jim Cheek, President. Joe Williams.
Well, I'm delighted to meet all of you.
So we received your resume, Mr. President. So the way we're going to conduct this is the interview is kind of conducted in public, but the discussion is done in executive session. So we're going to conduct this format of, we have 4 people interviewing this evening. It'll be a long evening, and then we'll do all the discussion in the executive session. So we have 10 questions, we're going to answer everyone. Same question. And so, when you're ready to get started, we'll just go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, sure.
First question we have is, has to do with budget. You know, finances are big in the school district. So, first question is, how would you handle budget constraints while maintaining high-quality education standards? So that's the first question.
Well, I've been through a reduction in force. When I became superintendent at Fordyce, they moved me up from high school principal. We had to have an immediate reduction in force. And it's not something you enjoy doing, but 80% of your school budget is for personnel. And for whatever their salary is, you've got to factor in another 1/4 for benefits. And I don't know, that may be closer to 1/3 now with inflation being so sky high. So, it's hard to go in and tell people you're going to have to cut back. Everybody wants small classes, and it would be great if you can have that. But it's just like at home. If you don't have the money, you don't have the money. So, we were able to handle ours mostly through attrition. But we did have some positions that we didn't think were necessary that we did away with. We decided that we were not big enough to justify having assistant principals, and we just went to a dean, and that was cost effective for us. I think that, I don't know if you all have professional learning communities here, but I have found that if those are conducted correctly, you can really get your teachers to buy into helping the individual child no matter what. And to me, that's the beauty of a smaller school district. I have never had any desire to be in a larger school district. I like to be in a small one, and generally you have community people who are very caring about those children, and I think that most of the time they will step up to the challenge when you show them that you're truly in a budget crunch. And I think you have to probably show them the figures. It was very difficult to tell those people my very first year that they were not going to get a Christmas bonus. But I went ahead and told them in August. I said, you know, you need to be aware of that now. Thankfully, we got some ESSER money that helped with lots of things, and we couldn't call it a Christmas bonus. We had to call it something else, but we did that. There's probably no bigger morale killer than not having a Christmas bonus. That was tough. But, you know, you want to keep your class sizes as small as you can. You can also look at your federal money and see what positions you can pay out of federal money instead of out of the salary fund. And that helps you some when you can do that. I would want to sit down with the federal programs director and go through that and make sure that we had everybody being paid out of those funds that we could. The ESA, we used to call it NSLA, but I think it's called ESA now. And, look at that.
Question number 2. What strategies have you used to improve student achievement in your previous role? What strategies have you used to improve student achievement in your previous
Okay.
role?
When I was hired as principal of Fordyce High School, the board called me in and said, your main task is to straighten up discipline. You cannot learn in an environment of chaos. Teachers cannot teach in that environment. They cannot. So you need to have student discipline where it should be, and I don't mean to just, be mean to them day in and day out, but there's no place for kids cursing at teachers, threatening to hit them, spitting at them. There's no place for that. And we straightened that up pretty quickly, and we exited academic distress that year. Now, there was another thing that I looked at kind of closely. We were a high poverty school district, and I think from looking at your figures, you've got, I think, 76% economically disadvantaged. Nutrition is very important for children, especially who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Now, I've been around poverty my whole life, and I was even shocked at Fordyce that so many kids didn't get a bite of food except what they got at school. And if you're hungry, you're not going to learn. I got invited to my nephew's big church in Little Rock once, and they had this big screen, and they had somebody there doing a presentation about doing a freshwater ministry to South America. And boy, that was so inspiring. I was ready to put on my pith helmet and get my Jeep, go to South America. Well, then at 12 o'clock, the preacher got up and said, now for today's sermon. I had not had any breakfast, and I suddenly lost my missionary zeal, and all I could think about was going to eat. Kids are no different. We instituted second breakfast. That was very key on the high school campus. High school kids are going to get that last minute of sleep that they can. And we would do second breakfast. We called it grab and go. We would just set up in the commons area, and they could get milk, juice, a cinnamon roll. And on the days we had sausage biscuits, they really loved that. That was great. And we did another thing that improved nutrition on our campus. We contracted with K-12 Culinary to improve the quality of the cafeteria food, make it more kid-friendly, that kind of thing. And that went over big. It seemed like we were having mashed potatoes and chicken nuggets every other day. And the kids were tired of it, and I could see that. I always tried to eat in the lunchroom so I would have a handle on what they were eating. So I think that's important. And we packed up backpacks with beanie weenies and mac and cheese for the weekends for those kids who just probably weren't going to eat very much over the weekend. You've got to look at the whole child when you're looking for academic achievement. I had to understand that not all kids were like me. I was going to make that A whether or not, and nobody made me do that. It was just one of those intrinsic things that was just natural with me, but not everybody's that way. I'm sorry, I feel like my answers are too long.
No, you're all right. No.
Okay.
All right. Third question. How do you ensure that all students receive equal education opportunities? Like you mentioned, there's lots of, we have a high incidence of poverty in our area.
Yeah.
So, what's some things you do to ensure that all the students receive equal education opportunities?
Well, I think you constantly need to look for new programs that will give them marketable skills. Do you all have your shop and agri program on campus, or do you go to a nearby community college for that? Yeah, well, you need to always be scouting for new programs. you know, the job market changes, and we have to keep up with that and be aware of it. As far as when there are complaints that not everybody is getting treated equally, I jump on that immediately. I think that it's good to pop in classrooms to see what's going on, you know, unannounced, just for a few minutes. And you can learn a lot just standing out in the hall. Just stand there for about 10 minutes and you'll learn a lot. I'm very big on everybody being treated equally. I think that's important. Poverty is probably the biggest obstacle children have in learning. Now, I didn't pay too much attention to what we always call the edubabble books in college, but Jonathan Kozol's Savage Inequalities really resonated with me. It made me stop and think about all the obstacles those kids have to overcome. And it is to society's advantage to help them overcome that. You want them to be productive, capable citizens. I think preparing kids for citizenship is very important, just being good citizens in the community. I always tried to work closely with the student council when they had some kind of a gripe about something. I always tried to treat them like they were young adults. I had a conference table kind of like this, and I could seat them all at the conference table, and I could serve them a soft drink and some cookies, and we would sit and talk. And that seemed to kind of tamp down discontent over some things. And some of them asked to bring their parent with them. I said, sure, bring your parent on. That'll be great. You always want to look for that bridge to the community that you can build. That's so important.
That's number 4. How do you evaluate the performance of principals and other administrators, which we mainly have principals here, and other administrators within the district? So how do you evaluate the performance of the principals and other administrators within the district in the past?
I don't think you have any choice but to do a test evaluation. I think that's still the official instrument that the state makes us use. I don't like it, but I would rather create my own instrument for that, but you want to do what AD tells you to do. I found that works very well. To bow very low.
Number 5, what steps would you take to address low teacher morale or high turnover rates?
Well, you know, if I had the answer to that, I'd write a book and get rich. Every small rural school district has that problem. Teacher morale, again, not giving a Christmas bonus is probably the biggest morale killer that there is. I try to do little things for them. Call Sonic with your app, get somebody to go around, get everybody's drink order, bring everybody a Coke in the afternoon. It's not much, but it says that you're thinking about it. And I always tried to have an open door policy where you could come in and sit down and talk to me about whatever's going on. I may not have the answer immediately, but I'm going to try to find the answer. I think to treat everybody equally and fairly. I think that teachers know if you're a good person or not. I think they know if you really do have their best interest at heart. And I try to do that. I pride myself on living my life by a code of standards. I have a very, very stable personal life. My husband and I have been married for 44 years, been married to the same man for 44 years. And we have 2 kids who are grown, at least chronologically. I don't know if we'll ever get them off the payroll though. and I'm doubting it, but anyway. I try to be a good person and deal fairly with everybody. And as far as losing teachers, I think you all have already done something that helps to attract students and retain your teachers, and that's the 4-day school calendar. I have found that's a huge recruitment tool to use. People want that, and they want a good athletic program. And when I became superintendent at Fordyce, they said, oh, by the way, you're the athletic director too. And I said, oh, well, how nice. So I got well acquainted with AAA. And it was actually a fun experience. But people want to have good athletic teams. And I want the kids to excel in everything because those are scholarship pathways. And the more scholarships you can prepare kids to have, the better off they're going to be. I want these organizations like FFA and all that, I want those all to be scholarship routes. I think they say that more kids go to college on a band scholarship than any other kind of scholarship. So all that's important. And if you have all those good programs, you're going to attract and retain students and probably teachers as well. Now, do you all have a private school around here that, oh good, okay, good. Shut that thing down though, okay. But I'm a fervent believer in good athletic programs. I think that it gives kids a purpose, a reason to come to school, to make their grades. I think it gives the community something to take pride in. I think it's just good all the way around.
All right, down to question number 6. Describe your experience with facilities management and capital improvement projects.
Oh, I've done that.
Yeah,
Let me
you done
tell
that.
you my success story here. We had potholes on our campus that would swallow a Volkswagen. It would chip a tooth and change your radio station. We had an HVAC system that was just nearly shot. And the only way we were going to do that was to pass a millage. And everybody said, Judy, do not do that. You can't pass it. It's going to make you look bad. Nobody's going to vote for a millage. I said, well, that may happen, but they can't shoot me. So let's go for it. Let's go for a 5 mil. So I took my little PowerPoint show to Rotary and to everybody else that would have me. And we passed that thing by 2/3 of the vote. And we repaved our entire parking lots. We built 2 new Blue Rock parking lots. And I'm going to tell you, I didn't know that asphalt costs the same as pure gold. I could not believe how expensive that stuff is. That's when we did 2 Blue Rock lots. But we had an arena that the HVAC system was about 25 years old, and every year at graduation I think, oh dear God, don't let that thing go out today. We replaced that. It probably kept us from going into facilities distress with the state. So yes, and I've worked very closely with Sean Carroll at East Hardy Construction. I don't know who you all use, but that's who we always use. So yes, I've had experience with building projects, capital improvements and so forth, and a millage increase.
This next question, I think, you touched on it, but I'll go ahead and ask it. What role do extracurricular activities play in a well-rounded education?
Well, you've got to have that to have a healthy school culture. You've got to. I'm of the old school. I think you ought to be able to look back on your school days and say, you know, that was kind of fun once in a while. I think that's very important. I think that all of these activities, not just sports, but clubs and organizations, it teaches self-discipline. It gives them motivation. It gives them career paths. It gives them a path to maybe a lifelong hobby that is enjoyable. I think it just molds the whole person. I'm a big believer in a student as a whole human being.
Number 8. Describe your approach to handling disciplinary issues involving students and staff. Describe your approach to handling disciplinary issues involving students and staff. A lot of that will be brought to you, of course, from the principal.
Yeah. Well, I would first investigate and see what the real story is, because I doubt that you're gonna get but about half of it. I would investigate that. I have had instances where teachers have been in the wrong, and again, it's not something you enjoy doing, but sometimes it's necessary to write up a teacher to get their attention. And I always told mine, and I did this in conjunction with, well, then it was Kristen Garner at the state, but I said, you know, your first write-up, that's gonna be your warning. The second one, you're probably gonna have about a 3-day rip, and the third one, we're probably gonna move to send you home permanently. And I have had some of that to do. I don't enjoy it, but I can do it. And you know, I've learned something in the superintendent business. Not everybody can do that hard, unpleasant stuff, but I can. I don't like to, I can. And I can, you know, I put up that icy wall when I need to, and sometimes you just have to.
Was that students or teachers you
No, I'm talking about teachers.
You're talking about
Teachers
staff.
when they're,
Especially when students are.
well, yeah, and with students,
Talking
I
about
mean,
staff.
you let the principal attend to disciplinary issues with students. That's, as superintendent, that's not your job,
That's not
unless
their
it's some kind of a conflict where it has to be bumped up the line.
Unless they bring expulsion, sometimes they bring expulsion.
Well, yeah,
It's a-
expulsion,
it's a push
sure.
up to,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta decide to push it to us.
Right, right.
You either gotta decide to push it or not push it.
Right, well, yes, we did quite a bit of that too, but I always sat down with my building administrators and we would examine if we really thought that was going to be the best for the child or not. Again, I believe that you should have a respectful climate where students and teachers or learning cannot take place.
Okay. Can you provide an example of a time when you had to make a difficult decision for the betterment of the school district? Can you provide an example of a time when you had to make a difficult decision for the betterment of the school district?
Well, having a reduction in force was a difficult
Yeah,
decision.
that's one.
That was probably the most difficult thing I've had to do. But we did it. We brought finances back in line, and I felt like, all in all, we had done a good day's work on that. And anytime you have to, you know, move for expulsion on a student, like we just discussed, that's difficult. Or move for faculty or staff to be terminated, that's difficult. But you do it when it's like that one rotten apple in the barrel. Sometimes you just have to remove it. That's all there is to it.
You pretty much covered that in the very question. What's she talking about, the betterment, making a difficult decision, she pretty much.
As a superintendent, you're probably going to have to make a difficult decision about every day.
The last question is, why do you believe you're the best candidate for this position as a school superintendent?
Well, first of all, I have a wealth of experience. I was in the classroom for 21 years. I've been a literacy specialist at a co-op. I had my own consulting company and got a contract through ADE where I supervised ALE campuses in the southern half of Arkansas. I've had experience.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
available?
Yes, sir.
My name is Scott Cheek. We'll go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm the Vice President of the board. We'll go over there.
My name is Patricia Carter Lewis.
Bobby Jones. London Tucker. Dylan Ty, Secretary of the Board. Jim Cheek, President.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bobby Cheek on the sheet now.
Cheek.
Nice to meet you. Dylan Ty. Nice to meet you. How are you? Bobby Jones. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. London Tucker.
Patricia Carter Lewis. You too.
Good evening, Dr. Terry. My name is Scott Cheek. I'm the Vice President of the school board, and I'm going to be asking the question this evening. We have your resume, and we're going to, this first part of this two-part process. The first part of the interview will be conducted in open session. Just going to be, we're asking you 10 questions. We're asking all, we have four candidates this evening. We're asking them questions, and then the second part will be done in executive session. So it's going to be a two-part process. So you have water, and we have some peppermints, and so I'll try to. We have a restroom right here. If you need to take a break, just let us know. We have an hour for each interview to be conducted today. So. That being said, we'll go ahead and start with questions. So, first question we have today is, how would you handle budget constraints while maintaining high-quality education standards? So I'll ask that one more time. How would you handle budget constraints while maintaining high-quality education standards?
Well, I think the first thing to do there would be to look at the budget and kind of see where you're at right now and try to make sure that you're maximizing your Title I money, your ESA money. Make sure that you're coding things correctly. That's one of the biggest issues that you run into sometimes is that things aren't coded into the right place to be paid for. So, and then at the end of the day, it's all about revenue versus expenditures. So you've got to make sure that you've got one greater than the other. And if your expenditures are greater than the revenue, you got to make some adjustments.
Moving on here. Next question we have is, what strategies have you used to improve student achievement in any of your previous roles?
Well, I think one thing is to make sure that kids are being matched with the programs that they can be successful in. I'm a big proponent of career and technical education. I believe that agriculture, science is a big, part of things that we're not tapping into a lot of times. I'm big into the building trades. I believe that we've got a crisis in our country of in the future, we're going to have problems with plumbers, heating and air, carpentry, masonry, those sort of things. So I try to do some things to make sure the kids are matched and understand what opportunities are out there. There's a lot of good ways for kids to make a living that are not necessarily centered on college. I know in the past that's probably been the one way that we have tried to, push kids into going. And it's not for all kids, but I think that if you've got kids that are in the middle that are looking for programs of study that will help them in a lifetime of work. You gotta be able to offer those to your kids. On the other hand, I think you got probably a group of kids there that need some higher level courses that are there, and whether that's AP, advanced placement courses, or concurrent enrollment. You got to be able to offer those high level courses so that those kids can walk out with some college credit necessary. And then you also have to have the staff that can challenge your students, and I think that comes from making sure that you keep the good quality people that you have that are able to challenge kids, and especially in high school, math and science is always a challenge. And so you got to be able to entice those people, and then also keep them here.
Question number 3, how do you ensure that all students receive an equal education opportunity? Here at the Indian High School, with poverty levels pretty high, so how do you ensure that all students receive an equal education opportunity?
I think, again, you've got to have the right staff in place. I think you've got to have the right principals in place that know their kids. I think that's really important. If you're not kid-centered as an administrator, then you're going to have a problem knowing what your kids want or knowing what they are able to do. And I think once you get to really know what your kids' strengths and weaknesses are, then you can tailor your program towards that. I think from the superintendent's role, the most important thing is to support the principals and the staff and when they're doing their day-to-day work, and to understand that you've got to get to know people in the beginning. You've got to build relationships with people, and that you've got to be in a position to where people look to you for trust and want to know that you're going to do the right thing for their child and bring good programs to the school.
Question number 4, how do you evaluate the performance of principals or other administrators that you may be, in the past within the district? So let me say that, how do you evaluate the performance of principals or other administrators within the district, or, you've done in the past?
I think, again, probably in the beginning, the best thing to do is to get to know that person first. Sometimes what you see maybe on the outside or what is perceived as, the way people are, might not be exactly the truth, So I think you have to take some time in the beginning and get to know people and build a relationship with them before you can start down the road of evaluation. Because, I think it's always good once a year to sit down, maybe even, in the very beginning, you've got to sit down with that person and just get to know who they are. People, along with kids, they won't know you care until, you show them that you care about them. So I think that that's very important, is to build those relationships with people. And then I think down the road, if there are things you need to address, you've got to be able to have honest, open conversations with people. Difficult situations or difficult conversations might have to be had, with the principal. I've had that before. It's a lot easier to do once you know that person, and once that person trusts you, and you're able to either help them, move on to a different place, or help them get better, is what the goal would be, is to help them get better in what they do.
Question number 5, what steps would you take to address low teacher morale or high turnover rates? I'll say it one more time. What steps would you take, to address low teacher morale or high turnover rates?
I think a lot of that again, has to come from your building administration. And I think that, you know, knowing that that person that you've got in charge of that building has the same philosophy that you do about, you know, having a high teacher morale. You know, it's difficult to make everyone happy. And if you've got, you know, fiscal issues, you know, you're gonna have to say no a lot, and that's not popular. But, you know, you've gotta be able to balance between making cuts and doing the things that need to be done, and at the same time, you know, letting people know that you appreciate them. I think it's always important. Doing anything you can to get more money into people's hands is always, you know, something that everybody appreciates and wants. So I think all those things are important to do.
Number 6, describe your experience with facilities management and capital improvement projects.
I've had the opportunity to be involved in about, I would say, $50 million worth of building projects over my career, from the beginning of 2 schools that consolidated. I was high school principal at one of them. I was then superintendent at the other one. Those 2 districts came together to make Costop River School District over in western Arkansas. We were fortunate enough to get a $16 million high school in the middle of a cattle pasture on the Oklahoma border. And I was basically, you know, got to lead that process, buy the land, and move forward with getting a new high school built. That was pretty exciting, you know, especially in the beginning of your career, which that was my first superintendent job. So I got to oversee that building project, and then went to another school district and basically was hired because a millage had been passed, so I had to implement that millage and do the buildings that they needed built. One of the things we ran into is that, yes, we had a millage, and yes, we had new buildings, but nobody had thought about increase in operating costs of those buildings. So we had to go back and make some adjustments. And, you know, of course, when you run a millage, you try to tell everybody everything that they want to get them to vote for a millage. So, you know, you have to turn around and then kind of reverse course maybe on some things that were promised, or buildings have to be smaller, or, you know, those sort of things. I think that facilities, maintaining your facilities is very important. Making sure that you've got, you know, the right system set up, you know, with your custodial staff, with, you know, with your teachers, and to understand kind of how all that works together is extremely important. And then also to make sure that you're watching out for what happens at the facilities department. You know, I go back to the first Huckabee, and that's when the facilities department was kind of created. And I actually think that was a very good thing. You know, before that, there was a lot of, you know, people building things on school campuses that maybe weren't safe, or maybe were not in such a position to, you know, be a long-lasting thing for a district. So I try to monitor what they do and look for opportunities with facilities to, you know, to either do HVAC upgrades or anything that's available out there, try to seize that as quickly as possible.
What role do extracurricular activities play in well-rounded education?
I think they're extremely important, and I think that we all learned that during the COVID pandemic. Whenever that happened, you know, that's about the only thing that kept people coming to school in a lot of ways, was, you know, that fact. I think if you have a good athletic program, it's always going to be something that, you know, people are wanting to be a part of. But I also think that, you know, you've got to have a good agriculture program, a good FFA program. Music is very important. A lot of kids are, you know, musically inclined. They've got, their brains are set up to, you know, to learn that way. So I think music and band is extremely important. I'm a huge proponent of extracurricular activities because I think that that's why some kids will either graduate or the reason they'll come to school every day is because of those extracurricular activities.
Describe your approach to handling disciplinary issues involving students or staff. The students mainly would be like, you know, the principal would bring somebody that was being expulsion. You would,
Yes.
that would be something the principal would bring you. That'd be kind of example, but or staff. So describe your approach to handling disciplinary issues involving students or staff.
With both, I would want legal counsel, you know, close by to make sure that I'm walking down the right road, you know, for those things. You know, in the past, you know, I've had suspension and expulsions and those sort of things that, you know, come to the superintendent's office, and you always try to make sure that you follow the right protocols. You know, sending the letters out and then giving an opportunity to come in and, you know, into a meeting and you know, explain yourself or, you know, try to work with them. But I always try to support the principal's decisions if they are, you know, have proven to you that they can make good decisions. You want to make sure that you're supporting that principal, because I've been a high school principal myself before, and it's a tough thing to feel like you're not getting supported from the superintendent's office, or that something that you're maybe trying to do with your kids and show a disciplinary action, and then it gets changed on you because of, you know, somebody's last name or whatever. You know, I think it's important to be strong and, you know, support the principal in you know, that process. At the same time, I think you've got to make sure that you're working with your legal counsel to make sure that, you know, you're not do anything to get the district in trouble, because ultimately the superintendent's job is to protect the district and to make sure the district is, you know, doing the right things so that they can do. With employees, similar situation, you know, but at the same time you want to also keep in mind to be empathetic to people and to understand that, you know, good people make mistakes sometimes and they do things wrong. If it's something involving a child, there's no mercy. You do what you got to do to get them out of your system. But, you know, I've seen a lot of things over the years. You know, coaches are always seem to be getting themselves in trouble, and you know, sometimes what starts off as horseplay between a teacher and a student can turn into, you know, something bigger. I've seen that before. So I mean, I think you've got to really make sure that you're, you know, listening to the counsel that the district has, and make sure you're working within those parameters to do the right thing.
Come on, Alex. Let's see where we're at. Make sure I didn't skip one.
It's 29 months. 29 months.
9,
29, yeah.
29. Can you provide an example of time when you had to make a difficult decision for the betterment of the school district?
I would say yes. I think that there has been times when I've had to cut a program maybe that was popular, but at the same time, you know, it was costing the district a lot of money. And, you know, the district wasn't in the position, you know, to have added that program in the first place. And that led, you know, to have to, you know, do a reduction force, do the things that needed to be done so that, you know, you can make sure that the greater population and the greater budget of the school district was in line. And I'm thinking there was an East Lab that was cut. That was tough because I was, you know, a big proponent of East Lab. Still think it's a really good thing for kids to be involved in. But at the time, in the district I was in, you know, we probably shouldn't have added it in the first place. It took a lot to maintain it. You know, had an extra teacher, so you had to kind of look at things and say, all right, this is what we're going to cut. You know, you have to have the 38 units. You have to have your 4 AP courses according to the standards. But there's just things outside the standards that, you know, according to the accreditation standards, you don't have to have. And, you know, that's the first place to look whenever you're going to do some, you know, some cutting. You know, you can take your high school schedule, lay it out. Basically, you know, here's your 38 units, here's your 4 AP, everything else, you know, subject to do what needs to be done for the district. If you're, you know, in some serious financial problems and you need to make some cuts. I've been in 2 different districts that had some financial issues that I came into, and both of them were able to be helped by using the things from fiscal services at the state. You know, the department, I think now that Dr. Saunders runs, and there's some things that they're going to do if you get close to fiscal distress, you know, to kind of work you through those things. I think that if you've kind of had some experience with those in the past and you start making those changes before they get involved, so to speak, that's can be a good thing to be seen that you're doing the right things from a fiscal services standpoint. But
Last question is, why do you believe you are the best candidate for this position as school superintendent?
well, I think it's experience throughout the years. Again, I've had the opportunity to be with 2 different school districts that had some serious financial problems, and I was able to work with them to get them to a better place. Both of those districts are still around today and still thriving. You know, I was superintendent up in the mountains of near Mount Judy. They were just about to shut the doors on that school whenever I went up there, and I had the opportunity to start a digital learning program that helped them reach out to a lot of homeschool students, bring them into the district, and, you know, provide some more revenue for the school. And you know, today they're kind of seen as the leader in distance learning around the state. I'm proud of that, and I believe that, you know, unfortunately, there's only one way to fix a school budget. You know, that is, you know, expenditures versus revenue, and you got to figure out how to get one, you know, bigger than the other one, and that's where you have to look, and it's difficult, you know, and it's not popular. So I think I've had enough experience throughout the years to understand that to not take things personal when you start making those decisions, and that, you know, you're gonna upset people. And you know, I think the biggest thing is to work with the board to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because it gets a lot easier, you know, when you stick together and, you know, back to the things that need to be done.
All right, that concludes all the public part of the interview. At this point, we will proceed to executive session.
7:18.
And you're saying,
Glad to have you this evening.
Glad to be here.
This will be a two-part interview this evening. The first part will be conducted in public. We have 10 questions we're going to be asking you. The second part will be an executive session. So the first part, I'm just going to ask you 10 questions, and you should have some water and peppermints, and we'll go. We have an hour for each interview. They haven't been taking that long, but You have all the time you want to answer the question. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead.
I'm ready whenever you
get
are.
started. First question is, how would you handle budget constraints while maintaining high-quality education standards?
Well, I mean, first you have to understand, it's always kids first. So that's where the money needs to go. And so you work around that part of it to make sure that the teachers have what they need to teach so that the kids can learn. And then you have to cut stuff sort of around the edges to make all that happen. I can tell you that when I was at Whitehall, I walked into a situation where they'd had 3 years in a row of deficit spending. The last year that was about $900,000. Which is not good. That gets phone calls from the state for you. And so before I ever even got there, I'd already gotten some of those. And so we had to work around making sure that we got that done and didn't deficit spend again, because that fourth year gets you into, you just don't even want to go there. So we managed to finish that, my first year there in the black, and never had any problems after that as far as that part of it goes. But you've got to be very efficient. You got to look at your staffing, because that's where 75 to 80% of your cost is. And depending on what your situation is as far as enrollment is concerned, if you're losing enrollment, then you're going to have to make some cuts. We were very fortunate to be able to do a lot of that through attrition. Didn't have to riff for anybody or anything like that, but we had to make sure that we were running as efficiently as we possibly could to make that happen. And so that's what we did.
Question number 2, what strategies have you used to improve student achievement in your previous role? So what strategies have you used to improve student achievement in your previous role?
Well, we spend a lot of time on professional development and training our teachers in effective instruction. I had the opportunity when I was building principal to work with Bob Marzano when he worked on the book, What Works in Classroom Instruction. In fact, my school was one of the ones that was used in that book for that. And so my staff was all trained on all the most effective instructional strategies. And so we've implemented that everywhere I've been. We did that when I was at Bryant, we did it when I was at Paris, we did it when I was at Whitehall. Benton, I didn't take care of curriculum instruction at Benton, so I didn't deal in that particular area. But that's one of the things that we made sure that our staff knew what was effective, what worked, and what didn't work. So we weren't spending time on things that weren't in the kids' best interest.
Question number 3. How do you ensure that all students receive equal education opportunities? We have a high poverty level here in the England School District. So how do you ensure that all students receive equal education opportunities?
Well, I think you have to make it available to the students and encourage them to do that. You know, there's a lot of districts, and I've worked in some where the status quo was to sort of direct some kids away from it. I tended to want to direct all kids towards it if they couldn't handle the curriculum that was there. So I'm talking about AP and those kinds of things. I would prefer that the child go and try and see, because a lot of times they can do a lot more than what they think they can. And so instead of saying, well, let's hold them back, I was more, let's see what they can do. If they need to back off, we can back them back out. But let's at least give them the opportunity to try to prove that they can do something. So that's kind of been my philosophy about that. We've had full arrays of AP classes when I was high school principal at Paris. That was one of the problems that they had, was losing students because of it, is they didn't have those classes available to them, so we put them all in and rearranged schedules and did what we needed to do. And then the second part of that was getting kids in those classes, because then you had to encourage them to actually go take the classes to fill them up, because obviously if you're going to spend that kind of money for a section of AP classes, you can't have 10 kids in there. You need 15 or 20 to make it worthwhile to be able to do that financially. And so we worked with parents to get them in, make sure that we could help them. We provided the supports that we needed to provide to make sure that they could be successful in there. And again, with instructional strategy training and things like that, to try to make sure that they could be successful or have success in those classes.
Question number 4. How do you evaluate the performance of principals and other administrators within the district?
I think you have to be where they are. You're not going to be able to evaluate them sitting in an office over here. You're going to have to be out in the building where they're at. and seeing what they're doing. You're going to have meetings with them to discuss what's going on in their buildings and just be involved. And I think you asked a lot of questions, staff and the parents, and those types of things to see what's going on in those buildings. I like to wear out shoes. I do a lot of walking in buildings. One, I like to be around the kids. That's the fun part about education, is being around the kids. And so that gives you an opportunity to do that. But I also will tell you that it was not unusual for them to see me in classrooms as a building administrator. And I may show up at any time, any one of the campuses. Just never really had a schedule that people could follow, because if they could follow it, they kind of, it's a dog and pony show, and I didn't really care for a dog and pony show too much. So I'd even drive around in a different vehicle every once in a while just because they couldn't recognize my vehicle when I was coming.
Number 5, what steps would you take to address low teacher morale or high turnover rates?
Well, that's tough, and it's happening everywhere at this point in time, because educators for several years now have just been beaten on mercifully. I think you try to work to find things that will be important to them, and again, be out there where they're at, and be in their shoes with them. I will tell you that I've spent the last 2 weeks looking at hamburgers for lunches for staffs at all of our campuses. We've got 3 more we got to do this coming week, at the end of the week, where we did for teacher appreciation. Superintendent and the 3 assistant superintendents all went to each campus and cooked lunch for everybody. All staff, not just teachers, but everybody. We have spent a lot of time trying to, again, make sure we're as efficient as we possibly can so that we can put money in the salary schedule and those types of things to do that. And it's not that money is everything, but you want people to feel appreciated for what they do. We're one of the few districts that actually kept the traditional salary schedule where you paid for education as well as experience. Now, we had to compress down the first part of that experience part a little bit to make the $50,000 work and all of that. But we promised our teachers that we would come back, and as we go through the years, we would address that to get it back, so those first 8 steps are back like the rest of them are. And to this point, we've been able to do that. We're about halfway there on getting it all resolved, but everything we've had, we've worked with staff to make sure that's what they wanted us to do, and that's what we've done. I try to help.
Describe your experience with facilities management and capital improvement projects.
I've done just about everything you can do.
You want
We just are finishing up the 2nd school campus at Benton that I've been involved in since I've been there. We're building a brand new middle school at Mountain View. We had just opened a brand new elementary school at Mountain View. Both of those will hold almost 1,000 students each. When I was at Whitehall as superintendent, we built a 17 classroom addition with a softball field on the high school campus, built a new PE gym, re-roofed every building in the district, put HVAC in every building in the district. I went through that. At Bethel Middle School when I was at Bryant, I helped design that campus. It saw all the way through to the opening of it, as well as Hurricane Creek Elementary School. Even when I was a principal in Wisconsin, I was on the design team for my home middle school, which was the last middle school that they built from start to finish. So had lots of experience doing all that and working with our facilities folks. We used Dr. Stein to help us with the state requirements and some of that part of it. But when I was in Whitehall, I did most of that myself as well to go through and do that. We had a consultant to kind of help with it, but we designed the plan and put the program together. Worked with the architect for all the designs.
Number 7, what role do extracurricular activities play in a well-rounded education?
I think they're extremely important. I had 3 kids. All 3 of my kids were involved in everything that they could be involved in. I had one really, really good athlete. I had one that was pretty good, and I had one that wanted to be, but he just didn't quite get the ability that the other 2 unfortunately got. But he knew more about it than any of the others did, and actually is coaching it now. And to say that, they were also all in the choir. and did that. My wife is a band person, so, now I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but, every time they do a halftime performance, I'd have to look and go, was that good? Because I wasn't real sure if it was or wasn't. But we made sure that we had those programs available for those kids, because there's a lot of kids, that's what brings them to school. That's what keeps them in school, is having something to be part of. And I think you have to try to give them as many of those opportunities as you can. When I was at Whitehall, we put in a volleyball program for the first time. Like I said, we built a softball field so we could get them back on campus doing that, and made sure that we had as many opportunities as we possibly could. If you've ever been to Whitehall, you know Choir Happenings is a huge thing. We went to the Pineville Convention Center every year, and they put on basically a Broadway production over there that they now get to do in that new auditorium that they just got built after I left. But all of those things are extremely important. The band is extremely important. The quiz bowl is extremely important. There's a lot of kids that need to find a niche somewhere, keep them into school, keep them active and involved. So I think you have to give them those opportunities.
Describe your approach to handling disciplinary issues involving students or staff.
Well, I would like to tell you, I've never had any of those problems. Unfortunately, we do. With students, I'm pretty much a by the book type person. There's a policy manual, there's laws, and that's what we go by. The board sets up and approves the handbooks, and we're going to follow those handbooks. I've told lots of parents, and I've had some come in that were mad as all get out and say, you talk to me about the policy or what's happening all you want to, but that's gone through a process that's got it to this point where that's what it says in that handbook, and that's what we're going to do. And that principal doesn't have the ability to change that. I don't have the ability to change that. We're going to follow what is there. I will also tell you, I'm very big on chain of command. There are steps that they need to go through, and that needs to be resolved back at the lowest possible level. They work their way up the chain to get there. Most of the time, my experience, people want to be heard. And if you give them that opportunity, that satisfies most of it. There's going to be some that doesn't matter what you say or do, they're not going to be happy with the outcome of it. But at least they should get that chance to have a chance to be heard by somebody. And dealing with staff, same thing. We have rules and guidelines that we have to go by. And if we have folks that are not following it, we're going to follow up with it and do that. I've had to terminate employees. I've had to suspend employees for different things. If you look me up for a long time, if you looked up Larry Smith, Whitehall, and teacher, the second thing that would pop up was one of my staff members at Whitehall that was having an inappropriate relationship with a child. We took them straight to the state board, got their license, there were charges filed against them. We testified to what we knew about it. They ended up losing their license, never spent a day in jail. He should have, but that's not the school's part, that's the prosecutor and the jury's part for that. But I think you have to do those things. You have to hold people to a standard, and you follow through on what your policies and guidelines say that you're going to do.
Can you provide an example of a time when you had to make a difficult decision for the betterment of the school district?
A really, really ugly one. Yeah. Right after we passed the first millage in Whitehall, and it was always designed to be a two-part program. We were going to take care of the classroom stuff first, and then the auditorium, performing arts, and all that was going to come second. The board, we had training with Beardsley, came in and did a board training on finance. And after that meeting was over with, and understand that Whitehall is made up of two communities, basically Whitehall and Redfield. And the board was 5 members from Whitehall and 2 members from Redfield. The 2 members from Redfield were not at that meeting, at that training session. And the other 5 from Whitehall knew that we were about to start that second phase. The millage was going to be coming up. And so they wanted to have a conversation about whether or not we needed to continue with Redfield Middle School. Now Redfield Middle School had about 106 kids in it, and it had class in it about half a day. The other half a day, those kids were in Whitehall already at extracurricular activities and stuff like that. And the board wanted to know how much it cost to operate that campus. said, okay. So we looked into it and understand that that consolidation actually happened in 1948. It wasn't a 2003 with this last go-around. That one had been going on for a long time. And there was a lot of bad feelings that had occurred over the years because of it, which I understood. So that's fine. I'll go back and do the analysis on it, which we did. It was costing the district about $1 million a year to operate that campus. We could literally take those kids and move them to Whitehall in the facility that we had with the staff that we had and did not have to have the other. And so the board made a decision that they wanted it closed. Now, and I remember this to the very end, the board president telling me that night that that decision was going to be made, that they would be mad, but they'd be over in about 2 weeks. No, not even close. Which I knew, but before we did it, but then I told them that it's going to take a long time to get over this. And so we went through the process. Guys, I got inspected by everybody from ADEQ to the health department to legislative audit to you name it. They tried to throw anything and everything to see if they could make something stick. They did not find anything that we had done inappropriate or wrong. Went through the budget. We showed them the numbers. Everything was laid out. But about 6 months later, it was finally all over and done with after a trip to court and some other stuff to get it finished. But I also will tell you that's why I'm probably not in Whitehall to this day, is because we ran 2 millage campaigns after that, and both of them went down 2-1. And guess where the one came from was Redfield. They voted. I think I got 3 votes in Redfield in one of the elections. I don't think I got any in the other one in favor of the millage. And it was a great program to put in place and was great for the kids, and they all agreed to that, but they did not want that there. And I told the board at that time, I said, as long as I'm here, you're not going to get that passed, and you're not going to get that built for those kids. And that was part of the reason why it was time for me to move. And I did, and they got it passed on the next election and got the stuff built, and so it's all there now. But and actually, it was my plan that was used to put all that stuff in place. So it's kind of nice to go by and see it all done now and have a chance to do that. But it was a tough decision, and it was hard, and it was hard on that community to be able to do that and have to do that and go through it. And, like I said, there'd been mistrust for years about going, and there'd been superintendent after superintendent who had passed it and kicked it down the road and kicked it down the road and kicked it down the road. And it just so happened that I was the one that finally had to say, this is not what's best for kids, and not what's best for the district. And so that's a decision that we made, and that was a recommendation that I made. My administrative assistant was from Redfield. She was born and bred there, lived there her whole life. She came in and asked me, she said, are you going to be upset with me if I campaign against this, closing the school? And I said, no, ma'am, as long as you won't be upset with me if I make a recommendation to close it. And so we kind of had to agree to disagree on that part of it, but it was what was needed to be done. And it had long since needed to be done. It finally just got done that at that particular time. That was probably the toughest 6 months to go through, was dealing with all that went with that.
I have a drink on that.
Didn't get a lot of sleep during that 6 months, I can assure you.
All right, number 10, last question. Why do you believe you're the best candidate for this position as school superintendent?
Well, I don't know that I'm the best candidate because I don't know who your other 3 candidates are. What I will tell you is I bring a wealth of experience. This is my 36 year in education, 32 of that's been in administration. I've been a middle school principal, a middle school assistant principal, junior high principal, high school principal, assistant superintendent 2 different times, superintendent, 20 years of central office experience. I spent 2 years at the Administrators Association, training principals all across the state. In fact, I've trained about 400 principals, assistant principals that were new during my time in doing that. I've been in charge of every part of the school program that you can be in charge of at one time, either as assistant superintendent and as superintendent. You're always in charge of everything ultimately. But so I do bring a lot of experience. I also bring a lot of passion for wanting to make a difference in kids, and that's something that is still true with me. I still think I can make a difference in the lives of kids, and when I quit believing that, I'll get out because it'll be well past time at that point in time. But I like working with kids. I like to see kids be successful.
Well, we Thank you for coming up and performing open part of the interview. Second part being executive session, so at this point, we will
You should stay.
go into executive session and you say,
7:59.
Vice President of the Board, this is a two-part interview this evening. You're our fourth candidate to interview this evening. The first part of the interview, you got it on? It's gonna be done in, as a public, and then the second part will be done in executive session.
Okay.
We got 10 interview questions, we're asking all the candidates the same questions. And should have some, you need some water?
I'm good.
Need some water?
You got an application, bro?
Huh?
His application?
Yeah. So, if you're ready, we can go ahead and get started. We've got an hour per interview, but get done early, we'll get done early. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started. So the first question is, how would you handle budget constraints while maintaining high-quality education standards?
So the number one budget question and the number one thing you always budget is, of course, salaries. In the situation where you're staffed to the point where you meet standards, that's according to the matrix where you need to be. Anything above that, you can add programs, or of course that cost, and it puts you in a budget restraint type situation. Anytime you're in that situation, one of the things that you have to do is make sure you have high quality educators. If you have high quality educators, you have high quality education no matter what your budget restraints are. You have to make sure that the educators that you have on staff are doing or providing your students with high level education, and making sure that they have the resources to be able to do that. And so the only way to do that is to, number one, look at the curriculum, sit down with the educator, find out what they need to be able to be effective in the classroom. Make sure you have those supplies provided for the educator, and provide as many programs as you can.
Question number 2. What strategies have you used to improve student achievement in previous roles?
So as superintendent in the old system, I mean, you have different systems. So every time you have a new commissioner, you change systems. You have a new way of testing, new standards, all of that. In the previous standard, your 9th and 10th graders took the same test in mathematics. So you had algebra and geometry in 9th grade, algebra and geometry in 10th grade. So if you went by the traditional set, which is what we were doing at my previous school, then 9th graders, you took algebra 1, which means that when you took the end of course exam, that you didn't know any of the geometry on it. So you didn't do well on that. 10th grade, you took geometry, which if you can remember all that algebra you learned, which algebra 1 is the number 1 failed subject in any high school in the state of Arkansas. So what we did is we took our upper level students that can track like that and score high. We put them on the regular track. For our students that were struggling through mathematics, and I would have been one of these students in high school, but we made them take Algebra A, Geometry A in 9th grade, Algebra B, Geometry B in 10th grade. It allowed our teachers to spread out the teaching over a 2-year period of time instead of 1, and then they knew algebra and geometry both years and could review that. And so our scores went from being bottom of the barrel scores to top level scores. All of my schools, across my whole resume, have gone from lower level grades to higher level grades. At Barton, we were D schools in my elementary and high school when I got there. When I left, we had won 13 OEP awards in 5 years, and we were B schools. I mean, I can talk strategies and I can go like system by system, but you probably don't want a 6-hour lecture, so.
3, how do you ensure all students receive equal education opportunities? Here at England School, we have a lot of poverty levels, rather high.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that all students receive equal educational opportunities?
It's simple. Every single student should have access to, what you offer. I mean, that's pretty basic. You gotta make sure, what you really need to do is make sure that every student has a student success plan and a graduation plan, very much like colleges do. And you need to have different pathways for kids to graduate. And depending on what that kid wants to do, you need to have a pathway for that. And so at Barton, we provided 4 pathways, okay? So we had a pathway for kids who just wanted to get a high school diploma and get out. And that's fine. I mean, like, I got criticized a little bit for that, but I'll tell you this, sometimes when you're the first person out of your family to graduate with high school diploma, that's a big deal. And you have more of those kind of kids in the Delta than what you think. So they may be the first, and if you're going to get out of poverty, you have to stair step out of poverty. It's not just one generation, all of a sudden you're out of poverty unless something happens. You stair step out of it. So you may be the first to get a high school diploma. The next, your kids may be the next, and they go to a community college, and then their kids go to a 4-year college, so on and so forth, and they move themselves up with each level. My family was very much like that, from my great-grandfather to me. I'm the highest educated person in my family, but I didn't get there just because. I got there because, each generation stair-stepped their way out. But the second level, you need to have a pathway for kids who just want careers and they want to graduate and go to maybe a community college. The third path is definitely a CTE program or a community college technical school, which is for higher paying jobs now. And then the third is a 4-year college or beyond. And we have advanced tracks in that as well. So if you wanted to go to Harvard or Stanford or whatever, we can provide those opportunities for those kids. Which you don't have many of those kids, but occasionally you have 1 or 2, and you need to have a pathway for them.
How do you evaluate the performance of principals and other administrators within the district?
So the first thing, principals, I always sit down with my principals, and what I want them to have in front of them is their data. I want to see your school in a data form. I want to know that you've broken down different parts of your school, and you can show me those different parts by looking at data. Once you show me that, then what we're going to do is look at what the weaknesses of your school are, and then put together a plan to be able to improve those weaknesses. And so once that is constructed, then you evaluate your principals, not only of the daily running of your school, that's a given, but also the success of improving the weaknesses of your school.
What steps would you take to address low teacher morale or high turnover rates?
High turnover rates are a symptom of pretty much a bad environment. If you have high turnover, you've got a bad cultural environment for whatever reason. So what I would say is you need to find out what's causing that cultural environment, and then you need to put a plan in place to fix it.
Describe your experience with facilities management and capital improvement projects. So any projects you may have been involved in.
So one of the things in my packet, you'll see, we were on the cover of one of the magazines. We passed a big millage, 12.9 new mills plus, a reauthorization of, what was it, 3.6, something like that. Anyway, about 16 and a half mills between the new mills and reauthorization. We expanded our campus by 7 acres. I built a brand new high school built onto our elementary. We built parking lots. We built indoor practice facility. We turfed and redid our stadium. We renovated our gymnasium. I built a baseball and softball field on grant funds. I had an admin building constructed, which that was more creative. So if you know the rules, then you can get creative and save taxpayers a lot of money. We had a 3-acre tract that adjoined ours. I cut a deal with a farmer, and he helped me pass my millage. Once we got our millage passed, he built me my facility, and then he sold me we came to a land price agreement. I gave him what he wanted for the land, which was probably a little bit over market value, but he built my building at cost. And so we saved taxpayers about $1.2 million doing that, and we got 3 acres and a whole brand new facility. I can do anything from reading blueprints, passing millages to, I've done all of that. Change orders.
What role do extracurricular activities play in well-rounded education?
If you have a well-run school, extracurricular goes hand in hand with academics, always. I'm just gonna tell you, if your ball teams are winning, you have a better year than if your ball teams are losing. All around, so.
Describe your approach to handling disciplinary issues involving students or staff.
My thing is fair and consistent. Whatever you're going to enforce it fairly, enforce it consistently. There are things that you probably have in your handbook that are hard to enforce. Just because you make a rule doesn't make it something that's easily enforced. I'll give you some examples of this. You can also, policy-wise, create your own problems. So I'll give you 2 examples of this. So at Barton, we had a rule that you had to have your shirt tucked in at all times. Okay? So on the surface, it sounds good. Your kid's gonna walk around with shirts tucked in, all of that. Okay, so if you have a sweatshirt or a hoodie on, and that's the rule, how well do you think kids are going to tuck in a hoodie? All right, so, but the rule is you have to have your shirt, no matter what it is, tucked in. So, you can create your own problems doing that. I had another situation at another school where girls were allowed to wear earrings. Guys were not allowed to wear earrings or jewelry of any kind. So first period, I would spend probably 45 minutes of my morning dealing with kids who had nose rings, kids who had 2 earrings instead of 1 earring, kids who had, so like I said, my main thing is be fair and consistent, and if you're going to have policies, make sure they're policies that can be enforced, and they're policies that are going to further education, not detract from it. Our main goal as a school is to educate kids. So my thing is, really, unless there's something that's taken away from the safety of kids, or if there's something that's taken away from kids being able to learn in the classroom, or providing a very manageable situation within the school, then really it shouldn't be a rule. That's my philosophy.
Can you provide an example of a time when you had to make a difficult decision for the betterment of the school district?
I have fired people. Without going into details, personnel, I had a situation where I had a supervisor who got hooked on an illegal substance, and that started causing problems. So I had to go through the process to terminate that employee. It wasn't something that was, a great situation to go through, but you want to help people, but at the same time, you're not going to allow that around kids. And so that was a difficult situation. I'm sure I've been through several more.
Number 10, why do you believe you are the best candidate for this position as a school superintendent?
So if you look at my resume, you'll see that I've bounced around a bunch of places. There's a reason for that. I don't just stay places to stay places. I get bored very easily. The reason my resume reads the way it reads is because in the beginning I was a state champion coach, teacher. When I got into administration, I wanted to make sure that kids had the best that they could have. After I reformed my first school, I went to a second one, and I got to reform it. Once that word got out that I could do that, I had superintendents who would call me, and they would want me to come in. And so I would come in for a year or two, fix what they needed fixed, and then bounce. When you're the fixer, you don't really stay around very long because you're going to make a lot of people unhappy just because you're going to do your job. And once you get things fixed and turn around, if they'll send in somebody behind you to run things and manage them, but a lot of people run things in the ground, and it takes people who know what they're doing to get them out.
All right, so that concludes the interview open part. So the second part of the interview will be done in executive session. You stay in.
Do you have a bottle of water?
Speed of bus.
10-12.
Make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion as a representative of the England School District to employ Judy Webb Hubble, Dr. Judy Webb Hubble, as the superintendent of the England School District for the England School District from July 1 of 2025 through June the 30th of 2027 on a 240-day agreement, who shall serve as the school district's chief administrative officer and perform all duties and possess all powers granted by applicable Arkansas law, rules, or regulations and board policy until such time as this agreement expires or is terminated. The superintendent agrees to accept the employment and faithfully discharge the duties incident to it.
You put something there about her salary based on our England handbook or whatever.
The salary is based on
What's in the England handbook?
what's stated in the current England handbook.
Stipend for the car.
Is stated, and she will be issued a stipend based on
$500.
$500 for the vehicle stipend and
$100.
$100 for the cell phone.
I'm gonna make a motion to
Motion by Steve, second.
Second.
Second, Mr. Ty. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 7-0. Someone make a motion to adjourn?
I make that
Motion
motion.
by Mr. Trish, got a second by Mr. Brown. All in favor say aye.
Aye.